Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a great honor and privilege for me to be seated next to Mr. Kabir Bedi. How does one introduce a person whose presence in our lives has been not only for a very long time, but in so many different facets? We've heard his baritone over various mediums, various channels. We have seen him perform on stage. We've seen, of course, his legendary role as an actor, not just in our country, but overseas. He's been knighted by the Italian Republic for his lifetime achievements with its highest civilian honor called the Cavalier. He's a voting member of the Oscars Academy in Hollywood. And of course, for those of you who know, he had starred in that famous television serial that broke all records called Sandokan, which was produced by a group of European producers, I think many years back. He also was the famous villain opposite Roger Moore in the James Bond thriller Octopussy, which also was filmed partly in Udaipur in India. And of course, numerous Hindi films where he has been leading man and leading villain. Besides, of course, he has had a very eventful life, to say the least, with many influences that we will talk about. But before we take it any further, may I request the organizers to play a short video on Mr. Kabir Bedi.
Any man bring me back those traitors, I will give him $1,000. Revolution! Fire!
प्रेम तुझे निर्बल बना देगा मुझा। प्रेम नहीं, राज कर सृजन का बेटा, सरवन सृजन का बेटा। ताजमहल
Understand? Justify sending those children into slavery.
At least the Tuaregs will give them food.
Dad, please.
you'll be fine, son. Just fine.
Fantastic!
Thank you. Thank you. Can we volume up? Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Bedi, let's start. Why don't you make some opening comments before we get down to talking about your very
Right.
eventful
Thank you, Raj. Thank you for that. I want to start with something that most of you probably don't know about me. And that is, before I became a professional actor, I spent 5 of my years in the corporate world. I was the film and radio chief of Lintas and the film and radio chief of Ogilvy and Mather in advertising. 2 big. So I got to know the entire advertising world very well in Bombay, as it was called then. And through them, I got to know lots of clients in different companies. And that being a long time ago, I've watched all of them rise up the ranks, and some do extraordinarily well, some change professions, some do things, but all people moving up the ranks doing amazing things. And then, apart from people I knew from that time, people from the corporate world came up and became friends because they said, we loved your voiceover in this, we loved the way you presented that, we loved you in this film. And some relationships became friends. So I feel very much at home in the corporate world in that sense. I'm, in that sense, one of you because that's where I came from. And it was a great and enormous learning for me at many levels of my life, because as I should probably explore, I went from government service to India Radio to the corporate world to the film industry in India to the film industry in Italy, then on to Hollywood. So I've had to adapt a lot along the way. But whatever I learnt in my advertising days has remained with me throughout my life and has served me in many, many ways, because so many judgments and decisions had to be made along the way. Not all of them were made correctly by me, but a lot of them, a lot of what I learned saved me from a lot more grief. And so my sense is that I'm a traveler that has come from your world and traversed the world, and I'm back here now to tell you how I survived the adventure.
Wonderful, sir. We will talk about your book, which I think is a thriller in itself, your life, and I'm sure this is waiting to be made into a film, certainly not very far in the future. But before we take up the book, I think there's a small video. Could I request the organizers to please play that?
Heartfelt autobiography. I bare my soul with emotional honesty, with stories about affairs and anxieties, milestones and mistakes, and successes that made India proud. Stories of heart-wrenching setbacks, how I survived the roller coaster journey by making, breaking, and remaking as a man. Stories I must tell is an emotional experience. I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy Stories I Must Tell, the emotional journey of an actor.
Amazing.
Oh, thank
What
you. Thank you. Well, I hope the sound department can make me sound like I sounded in that document, that ad just now, because that's what I'm looking for. they कहते हैं ना कि आपकी आवाज आपकी पहचान बन जाती है.
सही बात.
So अगर आवाज बिगड़ जाए तो पहचान ही बिगड़ जाती है.
So when I look at your life, and I sort of went through this book with tremendous amount of interest, I see it broadly breaking up into 4 different parts. Your childhood, your young days as can you hear? Hello?
Can you put the volume up a little for Harsh, please?
Yeah. Your childhood, I think that itself was very eventful. You were born in Lahore, you came to India, you were in Kashmir, and all the political influences that you had. You were friends with Rajiv and Sanjay Gandhi, and a host of other political people that you were associated with. Then, of course, is your very, very impressive young years when you had, you were very bohemian, I would say, very, very unconventional to say the least.
Pratima and I were the original bohemians of Bollywood.
Yes. And you lived a very unconventional life. You had multiple relationships. So that was a very interesting phase, I would say. No other word can describe it more appropriately. And then we have some struggles that you went through. And then we talk about your films, both India and overseas, and how your success became the reason for your problems as well. So if we take it one at a time, let's first talk about your childhood. And what would you like to share with us? Of course, I would recommend to everyone who wants to know it fully, because he's not going to be able to tell you even a tenth of what is contained in the book. Please pick up a copy of the book, which is available right outside. I promise you, I read it in one straight sitting. I mean, I would say in 2 days, I would say. And I think each one of you will pick up this book, will do the same.
You know, I've always had a love for writing because my mother wrote very beautifully. And then I was trained as a copywriter as well in advertising. So I understood the economy of words, not wasting time using unnecessary flowery sentences. Just tell it cleanly, evocatively, sincerely. And I think that's why people have connected to it. And I'm very gratified. I'm very gratified because the book has done very well. It's now out in its Hindi and Marathi edition too. It's called, it's called Stories I Must Tell, The Emotional Life of an Actor. And I underline the emotional life of an actor because, you know, if you want to know the graph of my career, you can go to Wikipedia and see the basic facts of what I've done and achieved and everything else. What you won't find in Wikipedia is the emotional roller coaster that a person has to go through when you live a freelance life. When you live a freelance life, not on one continent, but on 3 continents, dependent on the uncertainties of each continent for that profession that I'm in. Because in our profession, we work very, very hard on each film to get unemployed. At the end of a film, we don't know who the next project is coming from. So it is, I say, the most insecure industry in the world because everything is so fleeting. And I found that even the most secure people, the most successful, are insecure because they're afraid of losing what they got. No matter how big they are, 3 big flops and you're out. Very hard to survive that. So the fear of losing that, the fear of losing face, the fear of losing prestige, the fear of losing income is constantly there. And those that don't have it are insecure that they're not getting the jobs that they want to get it. So insecurities of living with insecurity is part of the business and part of what you have to develop the strength to deal with in situations. Nothing is secure even in the corporate world, I admit, because life is changing so fast in every single field that I think everyone, even in the corporate world, is in a state of future shock, just keeping up with the new developments. But the demands of the film industry certainly are exceptionally difficult at an emotional level. And you add that to the emotion of turbulent relationships you've gone through and things that are happening simultaneously. So you were, a volatile profession with turbulent emotional relationships, and you set yourself these broad horizons of wanting to become a name across the world. How do you survive that? What does it take? What happened? So that's the essence of the story, the emotional core. Many of the scenes in my book are really about, you could be a fly on the wall. You hear conversations happening, you hear dramas happening, you hear the actual emotional scenes, because that's why this book has related, because it relates at an emotional level. Coming back to your question, you want me to begin at the very beginning?
Just sort of snatches of the political influences in your early life. And, how you saw the...
Can I come to that a little later?
Yeah, sure, whichever way.
What I'd like to do is, because I started with this theme of changing.
Sure.
So, from the advertising world, which is full of creativity, full of bright people, full of its conventions of the way things are done and the way people agree and disagree, but in a reasonably civilized way on the surface, I jumped into the film industry. And I jumped into the film industry because my good fortune was that my bosses in Lintas were Jason D'Acuna and Alec Padamsee. And Alec realized I was an actor because I'd done work in Delhi. So he cast me in this play called Tughlaq, which is Girish Karnad's first play in English. And of course, Girish wrote a great play. Alec directed it beautifully. Bombay's best actors were there. But that's not what people talked about. What people talked about was the opening scene of the film, when I appeared on stage standing back to the audience, arms out, look with top light, black background, looking as though I'm completely nude. And the opening scene, the lights came on, the audience goes, oh! Nobody had seen a nude man on stage before. Even today to draw gasps. So, for all the merits of the play, which made it a success, all they talked about was my butt and why this play became a success. But that success of that play, which was huge, led to producers coming to ask me for work. And suddenly I'm called by this producer called O.P. Ralhan, who was, he looked a bit like Walter Matthau. He walked with a slight limp, and he had a very loud voice and a huge ego. And I was told the important producer wants you as a hero for his film, go meet him. So I met him. So he looked me up and said, हाँ ठीक लगते हो, बैठ जाओ. I said, okay sir. मेरी पिक्चर है, करोगे? मैं कहा सर स्टोरी जरा बता दीजिए क्या है स्टोरी? स्टोरी? मेरे को स्टोरी पूछना है? शर्म नहीं आंदी? मैं धर्मेंद्र नूं फूल और पत्थर च हीरो बनाता ते तू ना मुंडा मैनू कह रहे हैं कि स्टोरी सुनाओ? Sign here if you want to do the film. Yes sir, signed. Signed.
Which film was that?
Halchal. Now it turned out that he did the same thing to Zeenat Aman. That was Zeenat Aman's first film also. I thought as a hero, she thought that she was the heroine. It turned out O.P. Ralhan himself was the hero of the film. And Helen was the leading lady, famous dancer was his leading lady. So Zeenat and I were playing side roles in this film. And we had great visions of glory. Fortunately or unfortunately, the film did not succeed. Therefore, we did not get the blame. So, then we went on to other things. I had my first big hit with Kache Dhage. She had hers with Hare Krishna, Hare Ram. And that went on. But it was a culture shock for me entering one industry and going into the other. And then, because then the Italians came looking for a hero, an Asian hero to play an Asian pirate who fights the British Empire. And they asked for an actor around who was tall, bearded, etc. And they were on a tour of the whole of Asia to find the best Asian actor because Sandakan was an Asian character. And they met me, and I already had a beard. I was athletic. They liked the look of me, and the producer said, come to Rome for an audition at your cost. So at first I bristled. I said, what do you mean, my cost? I'm not some wannabe actor. I've had 2 big hits already. You're saying, come to Rome at your cost for auditions? कौन समझता अपने आप को? So then I said, stop. This is the opportunity. And I said, yes, I'll come. I went to Rome. I nailed it. And then it became a mega hit. And it broke every television record in Europe, a record which still stands till today, a 32% share. Unheard of. But to digress, to come back a bit, this whole road that I set out on was because I guess the path that my parents set me on. And my parents are very unusual people. They were graduates they were in Oxford University on scholarships, and they met each other, fell in love, came back to India, not to get the best corporate jobs in India, which they could have, but to fight for India's freedom. And my father, of course, was a rabble-rousing trade unionist, leading strikes and, agitating, etc. My mother was much more peaceful. She was actually picked by Mahatma Gandhi to lead the demonstration of Satyagraha in my hometown in Punjab, Dera Baba Nanak, in 1941. And I forgot to mention, my mother was British, but she was more Indian than the Indians because she always wore Indian, she always thought Indian, she always behaved Indian. And the British woman being arrested by the British police was huge news in the Tribune of Punjab, etc., etc. But they were extraordinary people. They actually, when I was born in Lahore, just before partition, there were actually huts, kutiya jise kehte hain. No electricity, no running water, 2 huts in a country on the edge of model town in Lahore, with the buffalo tethered nearby for milk. But this was the kind of adda which, because they didn't have much money, but they were rich in their idealism, rich in their friendships. And this sort of huts became an adda for people that became very famous later. People like Inder Gujral, who became Prime Minister, Gyani Zail Singh, who became President, Sheikh Abdullah, who became the ruler of Kashmir, the poet laureate of Pakistan was also there, Pran Chopra, number of leading leftists, Harkrishan Singh Surjit, all these people were part of the adda, watched by the police, harassed by the police, beaten by the police. So I grew up in an atmosphere of great idealism. And they also they were going through great religious changes after independence. They sort of said, politics is over, now look at deeper things. My father became a very original thinking guru who spent many of his years of his life in Italy. My mother not only became Buddhist, but by the end of her life became the highest ranked Buddhist nun in the world. So, the influence of Buddhism, of Sikhism, because the Vedas are descended from Guru Nanak, and of Sikhism, of the Hindu ethos in which I grew up, the Christian schools in which I studied, all those were part of my growing up ethos. But there was no money in the house. So even though I had enough money, I was bright enough to get marks to get into St. Stephen's. I had to find ways to support myself. So I went to work, because I liked acting even then. So I joined All India Radio, read the news at night, studied by day, did commentaries, voiceovers, documentaries and all that. And that led to my biggest breakthrough at the time, which was the Beatles came into town. And I was the biggest Beatles fan in the world. I said, I've got to meet them. I've got to meet them. So I went to my bosses, I said, I want to interview the Beatles. अरे क्या बात कर रहे हो यार, पूरी प्रेस उनके पीछे पड़ी है, आपको क्यों इंटरव्यू देंगे? I said, आप टेप रिकॉर्डर दीजिए, बिल्ला दीजिए, आपका क्या जाता है? Give it to me, I'll go. नहीं, ये फजूल बातें कर रहे हैं. I said, सर आपका जाता क्या है? मुझे दीजिए ना टेप रिकॉर्डर. I became so insistent, they gave it to me, like some parent giving a kid a toffee who's nagging him. And then, I don't have time to get into the whole thing, but how I beat the entire Delhi press corps and got an exclusive interview with the Beatles one-on-one in their hotel room, in hotel suite at the Oberoi Intercontinental. I've written about how I got that thing.
Amazing, amazing.
I've written about what happened in that 45-minute interview. But what's interesting is the aftermath of the interview. After All India Radio broadcast it, about 10 days later I went to get a copy of the interview. मुझे इंटरव्यू नहीं मिल रहा, नहीं मिल रहा क्या मतलब? बीटल्स का इंटरव्यू क्या मतलब नहीं मिल रहा? कहे जी नहीं मिल रहा है, क्या कहें आपको? So an inquiry was launched. I raised such hell. They found that the backroom boys had recorded somebody else's interview over the Beatles interview because they had no money for new tapes in those days. That's how badly All India Radio was funded.
So we lost that interview for good?
For good.
Wow.
Forever. And that shook me to the core so deeply. Because, you know, it's like you're given the Oscar and then somebody says, I take it away. I decided I don't want to work with these people anymore. Rightly or wrongly, I thought I just don't want to work with these people anymore. And with 700 rupees in my pocket, I left Delhi and set off for Bombay to make a new life. So that's how I came from Delhi to Bombay. And fortunately for me, one of my friends in radio, a wonderful gentleman who I'll always thank for the rest of my life, chap called Janki Gaur, gave me the name and address of Jason D'Cunha, who was the head of Lintas. And I went to meet him on arrival in Bombay, and he gave me my first job. So one thing leads to another, and that's how my journey began.
Wonderful. Yes, that does deserve a lovely round.
पूरी किताब बता दूं आपको तो खरीदेंगे आप क्या? No, no, I'm happy to share it with you.
There is so much, sir, that you can't really. We have Rekha sitting here. She's going to soon tell us to get off the stage. So वो पूरी किताब तो नहीं पूरी होगी. लेकिन now we must dwell on this. What I found fascinating that you were married 4 times, and you had multiple serious friendships, if I may use the word. When I read the book and you talk so candidly about this tumultuous period of your personal life, you talk with so much of sensitivity and respect for each of those relationships. I don't see, of course you must have had disappointments, but I don't see any element of bitterness that at least comes across in your book, and it must be also the way you look at life. There is this kind of, what should I say, acceptance to the fact that things don't always remain the same, change is inevitable, accept it with grace and move on, kind of an approach. Will you like to share with us a little bit of how these things came about and how you looked at life with so much of grace? In fact, there's one photograph where 3 of your wives are together in one picture. So,
yeah, there's a picture that I treasure because I regard it as one of my achievements, where I have my British wife living with me in LA, in my house in Santa Monica, under a Christmas tree, together with Pratima, my Indian wife, Indian ex-wife, and Susan, my American ex-wife, all 3 having dinner together under a Christmas tree. So
now isn't that an achievement? One round of applause for this.
As any man who's been married will tell you, that's not a small achievement. You know, thing is, here's how I see it. Nobody, at least I don't believe anybody, gets married with the intention of getting divorced. The intention is to make it work. The intention is to have a beautiful, productive relationship, life, grow together, evolve together, etc. Not all things work out, whatever the reasons. And by the same token, there is no such thing as a painless parting. There will always be great pain, anger, rage, guilt, whatever it is, trauma, if you separate. It's a terrible price to pay. Because it's a failure of dreams, of her dreams, your dreams, if there's children involved, their dreams. It's a terrible, terrible thing to go through. So I don't wish that on anybody. But I think at the end of the day, when that pain is over, and you think, why can't we be friends? I've taken care of my responsibilities economically. I remember why we were attracted to each other in the first place, and you remind each other of that. A kind of mutual respect builds, and you are able to become friends. In the case of one wife, my American wife, more cordiality returned, not great friendship, but cordiality. It is possible, although I must admit difficult, and should be avoided at the very outset by perhaps making wiser choices. But I don't regret any of that because, as we say, they all become life lessons. They all become, and I've gained a lot from all of them. Even if we went our own separate ways, the fact of the matter is, I empowered them in some way, they empowered me in some way. And so we can focus on the worst of the relationship or what is the best in the relationship. Once it's over, why dwell on the worst? How does it serve anybody? So that's how I was able to remain friends with all my ex-wives. And what happened in those relationships, something I've explored very, very deeply, especially my relationship with Pratima, which was highly controversial at the time. It made a lot of newspaper headlines. And my relationship with Parveen Babi, which was also highly controversial at the time, because we were living together, we were both well known. We both left India. I left India for my profession. She came with me. Then she left me in return. That's another story. But it was caused big shock waves that Parveen had left Bollywood to go with me. And there's a lot of, because what happened, as you'll see in chapter 3 of my book, while my greatest success of Sandokan was happening, and I was rising to the heights that actors dream of, Parveen's mind was slowly spiraling out of control. So I was dealing with this very dangerous situation, very tragic situation, where I was being pulled down by her problems. She was a lovely, wonderful, sensitive, caring, intelligent human being. But when schizophrenia, whatever it was, strikes the mind, something changes. And to deal with that was not easy. And I think just reading what happened in those days and how you deal with a situation that, with a person that you love in that situation, itself is very enlightening in a way, or it's a window into what happens in such relationships. It's a window into how you deal with such situations. And I also dealt with schizophrenia in the case of my son. There's a chapter about me dealing with how to deal with a schizophrenic son, and a story of a father trying to prevent his son from committing suicide. And this was, again, another very traumatic time in my life. So lots of ups and downs, milestones and mistakes, tragedies and triumphs, everything's all there. But I hope I've not gone too off.
No, I think, but tell me one thing, when you were dealing with both in Parveen Babi's case and your son's case, both with bipolarity or schizophrenia, whatever you may call it, did they ever know that they were having this problem, or it was only something that you knew and they didn't kind of never accepted it?
Parveen never accepted it. Parveen never accepted it, which is why she never accepted anything that I wanted to do in terms of getting the best doctors for her in London, where we had a beautiful house then. She absolutely resisted. She had a mortal fear of doctors. My son, on the other hand, did realize eventually. Actually, none of us knew what was wrong with him till about 2 years. He did realize, and that's when he started thinking about suicide. Because he was bright enough to know that he wouldn't quite be normal again, that there might be ways to manage it and control it. But given the medicines of those days, today medicines are better, I hasten to add, he just thought of giving it up. And the struggle that a father goes through trying to save his son, this I have chronicled because I lived through that. And the other thing is, one of the things of writing books like this, especially where you delve into the emotional heart of people and myself, is that you have to relive those moments again. It's not just some casual memory. You relive those moments that you went through. The agony, the ecstasy, the madness, the rage, the joy, everything, the reasonableness, unreasonableness, everything. And it stirs a lot in you. So this process of writing may be cathartic in the end, but the process is highly unsettling, highly unsettling. And authors, I believe in the end it's been good for me, but certainly at the time, the moments when I was deeply affected, deeply depressed, and I had to pull myself out of that to get the book complete. Because I'd set out to do this book, write this book after 10 years of thinking about it, and I was determined to get it done. And that determination took me out of those valleys that I'd go into. But at the end of the day, it's like a purging. Just tell it like it is, and let the chips fall where they may, and hopefully it will touch somebody, it will change their lives in some way, it will give them an insight into other things in other ways, it will entertain them in certain ways, it will give them a very unusual life on the road, and above all, what it is to live the life of a freelancer. All of us here are creative people. I might be in the creative industries. You may or may not be in the creative industries. Each one of you is creative. You've got your interests, your music, your painting, your film, whatever it is, whether it's you partake of it, whether you express it, we're all creative people. Now, the difference is I'm sort of in the creative industry. So I'm saying express your creativity in whatever way you can, because that is very much that's one of those positive things you can do to deal with the stress of life. And that's what I had to do as well.
I would like to speak to you a little bit about your parents. And they, of course, had a very important role in your life. But what I read from your book, Baba Bedi, your father, he kind of moved from his initial political activities to becoming some kind of a faith healer of sorts, some kind of a guru. And he had a great following. Your mother, on the other hand, became a Buddhist monk and a nun. And she took a very different spiritual path. Both your fathers, in a sense, father and mother, in a sense, had a very spiritual sort of part of their life, which is a substantive part of their life. Your life, on the other hand, has been influenced by them, and yet your life has been very bohemian, very unconventional, in a very, very, what I would call a karma yogi kind of a world. Yet you seem to be connected spiritually in some way, because you have always had this quest to figure out. You have been a follower of Krishnamurti, of Osho, of various other gurus. Yeah. And so I just want to understand from you how this, should I say, apparent contradiction worked in your head.
Well, for me it's not a contradiction, because that's me. I had this very deep religious background from my parents. In terms of the religious influence on me, I even became a Buddhist monk for three months of my life. With a begging bowl and walking on the streets in Burma, begging for food and coming back and doing Vipassana meditation under Mahasi Sayadaw, the greatest teacher. And those kind of experiences of being a monk, listening to my mother, seeing how she faced adversity, seeing my father, how he faced adversity, plus the wisdom that they gave me, that stayed with me. That was the center of me in the middle of all these storms. I believe if I didn't have that, I would have fallen to pieces. I would have fallen to pieces. But they gave me this bedrock of solidity, because don't forget, they were also, in a sense, freelancers. They were writers, they made their money. My mother was, after independence, she became editor of Social Welfare, which is a government social magazine, Social Welfare magazine. We lived in Moti Bagh in a government flat. So, but she was doing something she was idealistic about, which is caring for people. And that sense of calm in the midst of difficulties remained with me. So I have to thank them for my survival, because a lot of the mess was my own making, but the salvaging of it was thanks to all they taught me.
Wonderful. Now we have probably time for the last round, and then maybe one or two questions from the house.
Okay.
Since you are from the film industry, it would be, my audience here would feel not fully satisfied if we were not to ask you some chatpata gossip that might have been a part of your life, or something that you witnessed in both Hollywood and Bollywood.
Okay, so here's the scene. Sandokan is at its top. The streets are filled with people. Every magazine cover has me on the cover. Every magazine has me on the cover. I'm on every television show, every radio show. It's at the top. Parveen comes, I've taken Parveen with me to Rome at the time. So all our pictures were there together on these covers. The manager of Air India calls me and says, there's an invitation to dinner from Gina Lollobrigida. Gina Lollobrigida was one of the two great Italian actresses, Sofia Loren and Gina Lollobrigida. These were the two big Italian international stars, Hollywood stars. Fantastic, delighted, she'll come. So we went off to Gina's home, and the plan was meet at home and then go to a restaurant in town privately and meet friends at home. From the time that I met Gina at her home, she welcomed us, etc., introduced me to everybody. She would only speak to me. She refused to speak to Parveen. And Parveen, who was a bigger actress than me at the time in India, was not used to be treated like this. That she's some little chattel on the arm of a star. So her temperature's rising. I'm trying to balance her temper with all the praise. People say, oh, Sandokan this, Sandokan that. And yes, lovely, thank you. What's happening here? Oh my God, she's, temperature I could see was rising. Anyway, to cut a long story short, it's in my book actually. Cut a long story short, we were driven to this restaurant in the middle of Rome, beautiful restaurant, band playing, low lights, people dancing on the floor, at least the dance space, tables with candlelit things, waiters with white gloves coming, serving everything. And there was Gina, the manager of Air India, Melvin De Mello, me and Parveen. And we sit down at the table, and I'm thinking now Gina start talking to Parveen and all will be well. Gina says, come, let's dance. And she picks me up and takes me off to the dance floor. Now, part of me is saying, my God, I'm dancing with Gina Lollobrigida. I've made it in life, man. This is no small thing for an Indian actor to come and dancing with Gina Lollobrigida in Rome. Another part of me is thinking, what will Parveen think? What's going to happen there? I'm going to get in big trouble. Anyway, we chatted, I won't get into details. When we came back to the table, Gina finally turns to Parveen and she says, and you, my dear, what are you doing here? Following the star? Kato to khoon nahi. A woman who's the biggest star, who's my host, who's invited me to dinner, has insulted the woman that I love. What do I do? What do I say? Before, and Gina was single at the time and she was famous for her grand romances with big Hollywood actors. So, before I could even think of what to say, Parveen looks at her and says, no, my dear, I'm here because I'm with my man, because I have a man. So, Gina says, oh, she's very clever, very clever. Now Parveen says to me, let's dance. Mare gaye. So, take her to the dance floor. I realized something is not going to go well. I tried to calm her down on the dance floor. She was rigid as a board. I'm trying to say, I said, listen, don't worry about it. Gina's older than you. She's jealous of your beauty. You're far more beautiful than her. She said, don't try that on me, baby. Don't try that on me. I don't like this woman. I said, I understand you don't like her, but cut her some slack. She's a big star. She's got her own ego and all that. Nothing. After a little dancing, she said, I'm leaving. I said, you want to leave the dance floor? She said, no. I'm leaving the restaurant. I'm going back to the hotel. I said, you can't walk out of a dinner with Gina Lollobrigida? She said, yes, I can. I said, if you go, then I have to go. You do what you like. I don't like this woman. I'm leaving. And I had literally between here and that table there to decide whether I will go with Parveen or whether I will stay with Gina Lollobrigida at dinner, at her dinner. And I was hoping Parveen would change her mind. Then I went there, she went there, picked up her bag. She's leaving. She's really leaving. She's not threatening. Women do that sometimes. They just threaten, they don't do it. She was picked up her bag. I realized she's leaving. And I made a decision. I said, Gina might be the biggest star, but the fact is she has insulted my woman, and I have to stand by her. So I bent down. I told Gina, I'm sorry, Gina. I have to leave, and I think you know why. Please forgive me. He said, no, but dinner is coming. What is this? You cannot leave me like this. I said, Gina, I'm terribly sorry. I'm leaving. Good night. Thank you for your hospitality. And I left with Parveen Babi.
And that must be the last time you met Gina. Or did some...
Actually, no. This is even funnier footnote. About 4 or 5 years later, I was in Spain at the Spanish television station, and I was being taken to meet the head of the station. So I'm walking down this corridor, and all the crowd is bustling around. People are bustling around, 2 or 3 people fussily take me towards meeting the head of the network. The door opens, and this woman comes out. And I look at her and I nod, and she says, "You don't recognize me?" And I looked at her and I didn't, because I'm in Spain. It was Gina Laura Brigida. It was Gina Laura Brigida. You know, women change their makeup, they change their hairstyles, and you see them in another country, I didn't recognize her immediately. She went into such a rage, she stormed off, and I had to then explain to the head of the Spanish television network why this woman had shouted at Sandokan just before he met me. So
I had 2 bad experiences with her.
Yeah, with Gina, unfortunately. And I salute her. She's a great actress, and she's a great artist, great photographer.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Bedi. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harshavardhan, for your lovely questions.